Hi, I'm Kevin Dunn, the Get Fit Guy, and I'm here to share my accumulated decade of knowledge in the strength and conditioning industry with you to help you to become the best version of yourself. This week, I want to talk about the basics or principles of program design for strength training. The first thing we have to do when writing any program is identify whether or not we are training a novice, an intermediate, or an advanced lifter, because each phase of this training life cycle will have a different approach and a different training intensity, volume, and prescription. An intermediate trainee will be one who has maxed out their novice gains and now requires more complexity to training, while an advanced trainee will be in the same category but will typically have a more sport-specific goal like powerlifting as a strength-focused goal or triathlon as a longer aerobic type goal. The more specific the goal, the more specific the training prescription will be, and typically these will be built upon mastery of the novice phase. Typically, novices want to focus on developing control or mastery of their motor patterns. Motor patterns are what enable us to express all of the different ways we can move our bodies in space. We talked about this briefly in my first episode, but there are 6 motor patterns and 6 degrees of freedom in space. The 6 motor patterns are core, lunge, squat, push, pull, and hinge, and the degrees of freedom are surge, sway, lift, pitch, roll, and yaw. If we want to have mastery of our bodies, we need to have some degree of control throughout these 6 patterns and degrees. It's really important that we learn how to move our bodies correctly, because contrary to the popular statement that practice makes perfect, when strength training, perfect practice is the only thing which makes perfect. If we practice movements in a non-perfect manner, we're going to develop muscle memory and adhere to a pattern which is going to be non-optimal. Therefore, novices should prioritize mastering motor control before they move forward in a hierarchy of strength or training development. That hierarchy would look a little bit like a pyramid, with the wide base being motor control. The next phase above that would be muscular endurance, above that strength endurance, and above that maximal contractions. These are followed by strength speed, speed strength, and finally absolute speed. The way I like to think about it when I work with clients is that, first of all, I want them to show me that they can make the patterns required. Then, I want them to show me they can make the patterns and maintain them as they're becoming more and more fatigued. And finally, I want them to show me that they can make the patterns and maintain them whilst experiencing fatigue and controlling an external object. So let's circle back to muscle memory. Most of us have heard the phrase, but what it is based upon is a process which is called myelination. There's a protective lipid layer or fatty layer, which is called myelin, which forms over the pathways. And the more and more we send the signal down that path, the more we're reinforcing the pattern. So if we want to develop a new pathway, we need to do enough repetitions or spend enough time in those positions that we myelinate the new pattern. Because we want to myelinate a new pattern, the best way to do this is with high repetitions and more time spent in each position. We call this time under tension. The best way you can achieve more time under tension is to take advantage of a training protocol called tempo training. This is where we can slow down our movements and make sure that we focus on moving well in each part of the pattern that we're trying to ingrain. Tempo training has 4 phases. The first is an eccentric phase, which is where you're lowering the weight down. Then there's an isometric contraction, so you're tense at the bottom, followed by a concentric phase where you're lifting or pushing the weights back up. And finally, there's another isometric contraction at the top. In a movement like the squat, the tempo may be written as 3, 1, 1, 2. This means 3 seconds to lower the load, 1 second hold at the bottom, another second to stand back up, and 2 seconds to hold, breathe, and brace at the top before performing another repetition. Tempo is always read from left to right. In a novice training program, you'll do more repetitions at a slower tempo because you won't be using a lot of weight. So instead of having load to play with, we prioritize motor pattern development with time durations. The easiest way to train as a novice is by using the most simple prescriptions. As mentioned last week, we're going to find that the most prescriptions that are complicated are reserved for those of the highest training age, and the simplest prescriptions or training interventions are reserved for those of the lowest training age. Most prescriptions will follow some kind of linear progression. What that means very simply is that you're going to increase one of the following attributes as time moves forwards in the training program: your training frequency, the training duration, or the training intensity or load. You're going to be able to monitor whether or not you are above your minimum effective dose for training and below your maximum tolerated dose simply by monitoring your improvement. As a reminder from last week, the minimum dose is what you need to improve your fitness, and the maximum dose is how much you can take before you become overtrained. If you're able to add 5 pounds every single week to your squat and still perform 3 to 5 sets of repetitions, we know that you are improving because you're able to continue adding load. Similarly, if the load were to remain constant and over a period of a few weeks you manage to add more reps in each set, we could say that improvement is occurring and training also doesn't need any further complexity at this time. Novices will be able to continue adding load for a significant period of time before any further complexity is required. You'll know you need a more complex prescription when there's a breakdown in your ability to continue adding load or reps each session. Make sure to tune in next week when I'll be covering the basics of intermediate training options for those of you who may have already maxed out their novice linear progression. Get Fit Guy is a quick and dirty tips podcast. Thanks to the team at Quick and Dirty Tips, Adam Cecil, Morgan Christensen, Holly Hutchings, and Davina Tomlin, and our intern is Cameron Lacey. I'm your host, Kevin Don, and if you have a question for me, leave me a voicemail at 510-353-3104 or send me an email at getfitguy@quickanddirtytips.com. For more information about the show, visit quickanddirtytips.com or check out the show notes in your podcast app.